You're listening to the Classic Gamers Guild podcast.
Well, Paul, our topic this week is one which has been the cause of many arguments and debates throughout the entire history of anything. We are talking about the alignment chart. I asked you the other day to familiarize yourself with the alignment chart so we can talk about this. Did you actually do that?
Yeah, I mean...
That's what I thought. So how much do you know about the alignment chart?
Well, I thought I'd go off path. Instead of Googling it, I tried to use Bing, so I learned very little about the whole situation. Unnecessary dig on Bing, that was kind of weird. I've got nothing against them. No, when I got your text about doing this chart thing, I didn't know what them things were called, so I was like, yay, like this will be a really entertaining podcast on spreadsheets and pie charts or whatever. The people are going to eat this one up. But now I do see what you're getting at. I recognize the meme, and I understand where the argument thing comes from, because I was trying to look at a few for like homework for this episode, and I couldn't find one as a good reference because I disagreed with bloody every one I saw. Like one of them had Peter Griffin as chaotic evil. That's a bit extreme. I wouldn't say he's evil, let alone chaotic, but anyway, we'll get to video game characters.
It's been a while since I watched Family Guy, because it just stopped being funny to me for quite some time ago. But I'm not the best one to speak on Peter Griffin. For those of you who don't know, I'm sure all of you know, but just like a little bit of a background on it. So basically, what the alignment chart is, it's taken on various forms right now, but the version of the alignment chart that is kind of the most common is basically represented as a 3x3 grid, along which the three columns running left to right would be lawful, neutral, and chaotic, and then the rows from top to bottom would be good, neutral, and evil. And this is basically sort of a way to categorize various different archetypes of character personalities and moralities, really is what I should be saying. So when it started with the original Dungeons & Dragons, I think it really was only lawful, neutral, and chaotic. And I think the alignment chart as we really know it today started with the second edition. It's gone through a few forms since then, but I think by the fifth edition, they've come back to the 3x3 format. But I think they also included a new one, the unaligned, which we're not going to talk too much about. It's really just for like creatures that just function entirely on habit and instinct and survival. So they don't really, morality just doesn't apply to them. So the alignments therefore are lawful good, neutral good, chaotic good, lawful neutral, true neutral, and chaotic neutral. I think some people just refer to true neutral as neutral, but for the purpose of this show, for the remainder of the show, we'll refer to it as true neutral. And then finally, there is lawful evil, neutral evil, and chaotic evil. Now, the reason why I really wanted to talk about this is because one of the arguments that comes about is just the entire... People think that it's a stupid system. Like they say like, oh, it's fundamentally flawed. There's no purpose or use for it. There's no, they just wish that it doesn't even exist because they think it's just kind of a dumb idea to begin with. And I defend it on several levels. Number one, I think it's just fun to sort of speculate. I think that it can be a useful tool when it comes to character interpretations and character creations. Now, by no means do I think that it is the one and only way, obviously. And as I talk about characters, I do not in any way mean to imply that the creators or the authors had the alignment chart in mind while creating them, but I do think that if one should want to design characters or even think about characters, it could be a very useful tool to give you a certain perspective on them.
Absolutely, and that's all the time we have today. So,
sorry, it took me a while to get through that. Okay, so basically, let's look at this a little bit broader. Let's go through lawful versus neutral versus chaotic. So lawful means that you are aligned towards order. So you believe in law, and how you apply the law will determine if you're good, neutral, or evil. Neutral is neutral, as you would know. It kind of, I wouldn't say indifferent, but just sort of like a neutral on that axis believes that there is a place for the law, but also allows for the idea that there are times when the law does not necessarily is not necessarily the right decision or not necessarily the right path to take. Chaos has either complete disregard, if not spite, for laws and regulations, so they are very anti-order.
Okay. All right, I'm getting it. I think I got it. So the not to jump the gun, but I can't help but say it's the only thing my mind's repeating over and over again. The poster child for a lawful neutral, being on the side of the law while being utterly neutral would have to be Keith from Police Quest 2. Right?
I could definitely think that. This is again where things kind of get a little bit hazy because, we're trying to break everyone into 3 columns in either direction. So there's going to be a lot of gray areas and overlaps. So, right. He is aligned with the law. He is. So I think you are probably the closest to correct in terms of a lawful neutral in regards to Keith in Police Quest 2. The reason why I find the alignment chart fascinating is because of these kind of debates that can happen. If you want like real poster child examples, we're talking about like Judge Dredd. He is like the embodiment of order. He follows the letter of the law. It doesn't matter who you are or what your intent. He is the rule book, and he says, if you do this, then it's against the law. And here is the penalty for that. He doesn't exercise any judgment beyond what the law dictates. Obviously some people are very much absolutely not for debate. The Joker is everything about chaotic evil. He is the embodiment of chaotic evil, right? But then you get to a character like Two-Face, and nobody knows how to define Two-Face. Because what the hell is he, right?
Right. Well, yeah, that's kind of the point of Two-Face, is which side of the face you're going to get. So, yeah, it would make sense that he wouldn't ever have a permanent residency in any of these slots.
So, on the chaotic good scale, you have someone like Captain Kirk and Captain Malcolm Reynolds from Firefly. Both different characters, but in the same little side of the square, right? So, just because you're thinking of characters in terms of these 9 archetypes does not mean you can't get a pretty fair amount of variance in the characters. The other thing to think about is that if you're designing characters, there's, it's a good way to look at somebody's character arc. If they're going to start and largely exist throughout the story in one alignment, and the purpose of their character is to eventually become a different alignment by the end, right?
Right, and I'm sure that's where a lot of debate comes from. Where if you put a character in a certain slot, you let's say I would pick somebody and put them in a slot and say, they are a true neutral. It's just the way it is, and I'm picking that based on how their arc ended. So at the end of the day, they turned out to be a true neutral, and people could say, well, in episode 27, he actually, and it's like, all right, so certain parts of any character's arc, they probably should show some variance between good and evil and things like that. So I guess for the sake of finality or argument, as we go through some, we could say that we're going to try and base it on how their characters represented at the end of their arc.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it is a sort of like, when you try to determine a character, they generally try to step back a little bit further and kind of take them as a whole, as opposed to individual moments. For instance, have you seen the movie Dredd from 2012, I think?
Yes.
Okay. So here is the one argument I will give for people who try to call him lawful good, because at the end of the movie, he does have that one moment where he chose to be lawful good instead of lawful neutral. because the entire point of his character was to embody the law, right? That's his whole thing. I am the law. But the point of that movie was that at the very end, when he finally had to give like that final evaluation for his little protege there, they asked, oh, so is she a pass or a fail? And she actually should have failed because she didn't follow the exact letter of the law and she like basically quit. But he still just looked over and said like, she's a pass. Because he finally understood that, okay, well, you know what? Ultimately, she acted for good and it was better. You know, the force would have been better with her than without her, kind of thing. So he had that slight break. Like I don't think we're ever going to really come to the conclusion that he has permanently changed, but he at least for that one moment saw that that justice was not necessarily the law.
Right. Yeah, and I can see that blurring the lines a lot, because then it's like, well, are you going by the end of his arc or how he was throughout the majority of his story? So, yeah, I could definitely see how arguments get started, and possibly not ended with this.
The other thing that's really interesting about the alignment charts too, it's really kind of neat to sort of see when you design a story how characters will are at conflict because of their alignments, right? I am not saying that every author or creator has thought about the alignment chart in creating their characters, but there's some really interesting dynamics that can come about if you think about it in this way. So something like Les Mis, the musical version, because I never read the actual books, but one of the interesting, I think the most interesting character in that whole thing was Javert, who was very, very lawful neutral. It's kind of the antagonist of the story, but that's only because the hero or the protagonist of the story got himself on the wrong side of the law. And that is the only reason why Javert is kind of going after him. And interesting thing about that character is that his character doesn't really arc. Like, his character kind of changes, but still stays within the same framework. This is kind of like another interesting thing to think about when it comes to character arcs is, what if people don't fundamentally change? So one of the things about Javert is that, especially in the musical version, he has a song where he kind of like spills out everything that you need to know about his character. And he basically says like, he has his duty, he follows that duty, and that is what God intended for him in his life. And he believes that he should pursue that with the fullest conviction. And anyone who should ever question God's purpose for their life is basically the equivalent of Lucifer.
Right.
So at the crucial moment of his character arc, his life is spared by Jean Valjean, who he has been chasing this entire time in the with the intent of throwing him back into prison and thus ruining his life. And when he was at his mercy, Jean Valjean spared him, which kind of threw him into an existential crisis. But he was so devoted to his lot in life that he faltered, and therefore felt that the only answer to moving forward was to take his own life and kill himself. Right? So there is definitely a distinct moment of change, but he still stayed within the same framework of the lawful neutral. And so that's kind of, he's a very fascinating character, which I really enjoy thinking about in terms of character analysis.
Well, I'd like to shout out real quick to anybody who chuckled to themselves when Rick said duty a few minutes ago. I really enjoyed that. It's just that everything you were saying was quite intelligent and well thought about, that I didn't want to break your train of thought to laugh at something a 9-year-old would.
All
but
right,
I'm not
so
above
moving
that.
on.
So for the purpose of the podcast, do we want to like create our own alignment chart, or do you just kind of want to?
We can go through and discuss. But before we even get into that, I was going to give like a little bit of the disclaimer for the rest of the show, because I'm all about those disclaimers. One of the controversial factors about the alignment chart is that everyone has very different interpretations of the chart and interpretations of how characters fit into the chart. So we are going to be talking about our views and our opinions, and they are up for very great heated debates. So by no means are we saying that ours are factually correct, but we'll do our best.
And for my anti-disclaimer, mine are factually correct. Fight me. Even though I've just discovered this a few moments ago.
All right.
Well, so starting with lawful good, I find this one to be
Sonny Bonds.
That was you know me too well, mate. That was probably no surprise, but at the same time, that was going to be my suggestion. The only thing I stopped to think was like, it goes back to what we said about, you know, following rules and how much that matters. You know, if the, like that moment in Judge Dredd, if the higher ground is to break the rules or the orders and just do good, then I'd say that, you know, is well, first of all, let me back up. Did Sonny Bonds, to your recollection, did he ever break his orders to do what he was supposed to do, or was he completely lawfully good?
I believe he is completely lawfully good. I don't think he's ever broken instructions or anything like that. But even then, I think lawful good is kind of a lot of somebody who believes that the law is in place for a good purpose in the world.
Right.
So I think that Sonny Bonds really epitomizes that.
Right.
People might disagree with me on this one, but I think that a really good example of neutral good would be someone like Batman, because he is ultimately for justice, and he is kind of aligned with the law, but he also steps outside of the law to do what he thinks is ultimately right and good.
Right.
Because he's a vigilante, so he's not actually the law, and kind of what he does is kind of very illegal. But he himself recognizes that he works with the police quite often. He's allied with the police quite often. He's also against the police at some times, but he just knows that there is there's order, but then there's also justice. And, sometimes criminals can slip through the cracks of the legal system because of, bureaucracy, red tape, and corruption. And sometimes you need to step outside of the law in order for justice to truly be served.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I guess it's almost like a nice placeholder so they can swerve in either direction as morality dictates they do. All right, so we got one for the chaotic good. We kind of alluded to earlier that Robin Hood is a great, poster child for that. So I'm going to try and come up with something else, because even though we have Conquest of the Longbow, and we could use him, I'm going to try and, for originality, come up with another. I'm going to suggest two to you. You tell me which one you think would be better. I know you have a lot more experience with one of them. So the first one would be Roger Wilco.
I was just about to say, I kind of expected you were going to say that. And I would... I'm very iffy on him as to whether or not he would be neutral good or chaotic good. I think an argument can be made for either, and that's really going to come down to personal interpretations. To the extent that I think he's so close to the middle that I'm not even really sure where I stand on him. I think I'm more inclined to say neutral good.
Yeah, actually...
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think he has a little side of a chaos to him, but I think he is ultimately neutral good.
You actually, I'm going to flip-flop. I think you're right, because the more I think about it, the chaos that follows Roger is incidental. It's inherent. It's I don't feel like he causes the chaos. It just happens to follow him. Mm-hmm. I think he's just kind of, in this blissful ignorance while everything just seems to happen around him. I don't think he does anything to actually cause the chaos. He just is always a part of it. So yeah, let's put Roger in neutral good, and that'll look better on our little chart when we're done anyway.
I think it would make sense, because I don't think he I don't think he has contempt for the rules. I don't think he ignores the rules. He's obviously not a guy who follows the rules either, right? Like he still cheats on tests in order to pass his training, right? So
yeah, in the most relatable scene of any video game I've ever played. Yeah.
So yeah.
Now we've got neutral all settled and tucked away. I like that. Feel better about it now.
Mm-hmm.
For chaotic good, I'll still throw two at you, because the one I keep thinking of, I know you don't have a ton of familiarity with.
It better not be from Gold Rush.
No,
Okay.
it's not. I was gonna throw Gerard into neutral, but but thank you. No, you're the one that mentioned it this episode. I appreciate it. So for chaotic good, I've got two. I've got Guybrush Threepwood, and I've got Bobbin from Loom.
Guybrush could probably work. I think. I think he is. He is a force for good, and I think he is. Based on being a pirate, I think an argument could definitely be made for him being on the chaotic side. So again, I'm not sure if he is necessarily morally chaotic. So I'm a little bit on the gray area with him between chaotic and neutral. But yeah, so that is definitely a character that I think either people can really debate about, or I'm off the mark and everyone's going to tell me I'm stupid about that.
Right. Well, redirect your hate, mates. I'm the one that brought it up. Give it to me. I mentioned it, as you alluded to, with the pirate factor, but I look at him as somebody he's going to do what needs to be done. And obviously what needs to be done is the right thing, and no matter what. So he'll break somebody out of prison, and he'll basically just do what it takes. He doesn't really think about the rules or the laws he doesn't let them get in the way of him doing what he thinks is right.
Yeah. I guess it it could make sense. Like I said, I'm not opposed to thinking of him as chaotic good. I don't really know. There can be argument made. I'm just saying. So, with Bobbin, Bobbin, good one. Like, how would you describe Bobbin? He's definitely a good, but I don't know if he is necessarily chaotic.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, but I guess if you really dissect his actions, there's nothing I can think of offhand that is truly chaotic in his actions. He's basically where in the scenario that he exists in, everything he has to do is considered, let's say, unlawful. But that doesn't mean that what he's doing is chaotic. He's just kind of doing the right thing despite what he's told to do. Mm-hmm. Well, I can say at least that the Guybrush out of the two is probably, I would think, better served. I would definitely say
that. Yeah.
All right. Let's move to lawful neutral. I'm gonna have to kind of stand by my first one with Keith. I feel like he's the perfect lawful neutral because he's on the side of the law and he's so neutral he does nothing.
I'm just torn on him because I think that's a good argument to make, but I also think he could be true neutral. Just because he is in this state of just not caring about anything in either direction.
Right. Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's very easy to put him under lawful because he's technically a policeman, but does that mean does he do anything? He's such a bloody nihilist. It is hard to put him on the left or right side. Yeah. All right. Let's scoot him to true neutral because you're right. He does nothing just because just because of where he works doesn't actually mean he's lawful. Mm-hmm.
But like I said, there's an argument to be made both sides. He could very well. I don't think we've seen enough of his character to really understand his morality. I think what he demonstrates really kind of comes across as a true neutral because it looks like he kind of has that just as a job more so than any actual desire to do good. But you could also,
what I think settles it?
What?
Sorry to cut you off there. I think what settles it is that scene on the airplane. He's off the clock. He's not getting paid. Something goes down and he does fuck all. There's his true colors. All right. Keith is going to true neutral. So do you have any lawful neutrals that stick out in your mind?
For gaming, let me think. Copy protection.
Nice. I like that because it's a fourth wall character.
Yes. So anyone who really just kind of very coldly adheres to the rules. So I'm trying to think. Give me 1 second to think about this. The guy in Space Quest 4 who works at you're the manager of the Monolith Burger in Space Quest 4 is lawful neutral. Because he demands that the burgers be made a certain way. He doesn't give a crap who you are. You either do it right or you do it wrong. And if you do it right, then good. If you do it wrong, then you're fired. So he's not in any way aligned with he really is just like do it my way or do it the right way, and that's all he's concerned about.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. Because just before you said that, I had actually just simultaneously thought of two other ones who both were from Space Quest, different and the same. So I thought of Arnoid, the Annihilator.
Yeah, actually.
The Arnold robot, right? Yeah, nice and black and white, just he's doing what he's supposed to do. And
yeah, it's a good
one. Technically, Roger did break that law, so he is on the law side. And then the other one I thought of was WD-40.
Yeah. It's easy to look at them as evils because they're antagonists, but I think at the heart of them, they are basically neutral. So yeah, I would definitely put them along the lawful neutral scale.
Yeah, and this, yeah,
or you can argue that morality, like, they're robots, so they're just by design. So, but I mean, I think they have a sentience to them, right? So I think we can still kind of put them in. But you could also sort of think of them as, I don't know how you would put robots into the scale, to be honest.
Well, you're right, because if you look at WD-40, for example, she's once Roger and the crew captures her, she's reprogrammed. So you could argue that, however you program them is how they're going to come out. So for the sake of argument, we're just taking them at face value. And I'd remind anyone listening who wants to disagree because they were protagonists in the game that Roger was kind of wrong. Like he did steal. Yeah. And he was the one that broke the law, and they were the ones enforcing the law. So, yeah, no, I think they'll work.
Yeah, I agree with those.
I guess the only one that I struggle with is probably chaotic neutral. That one's
chaotic.
Because I can understand lawful neutral. Being neutral but erring on the side of law. But it's like how are you neutral while also being chaotic?
So a chaotic neutral would be somebody who is very about personal freedoms. A lot of people who are very pro-freedom tend to end up on the chaotic side of the scale. So, I'm trying to think of like a really good example of a chaotic neutral. So like, Jack Sparrow from the Pirates of the Caribbean would probably be a good chaotic neutral because he's just very about freedom. He's just he doesn't do things because they are good or evil. He does not really in any way tie himself or hold himself to the confines of the law or the rules. I'd like to think chaotic neutral might be Leisure Suit Larry or Larry Laffer.
Exactly what I was going to say. Yes. Yeah.
Because he kind of, again, he doesn't necessarily have to be spiteful of the law, but I think he just kind of, he doesn't necessarily, he's not particularly beholden to the law, or to order or anything like that. I think he is that kind of, he will do what it takes, for his best interests.
Right. Exactly. It's all about his best interests and give or take, he's not really hurting anyone. He's just living his life, doing his thing. So it's ultimately, it's not really for good or bad. In other words, it's just for him.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's exactly what I was going to say.
He is somebody that I can kind of, I'm sure I could be swayed with anyone else who puts in a really good argument. So if you have if you're listening to this and you really think, oh no, he's actually something else, I want to hear it because I could totally be convinced otherwise, but I just sort of off the top of my head, I think that he strikes me as kind of more chaotic neutral.
Yes. Yeah. No, I agree. I was thinking the same thing at the same time, so I can't really persuade either way. Well, I was. God, these are quite difficult because so many of them could fit a few different categories.
No, exactly, and that's kind of one of the other things to think about when it comes to if you want to create or take apart a character, is also thinking, hey, you know what? There might be times where a character will be one alignment in one situation, and in another situation will be different. Right. Exactly. Yeah. So I'll just continue to try and think overall. Even if it's 60-40, what were they in that 60? Run lawful evil, which again, I guess it kind of relates to video games, but if you want sort of like a very shining example of lawful evil, we would look at the Sheriff of Nottingham. This is one I don't really have anybody in mind for. I don't know. Like I was gonna throw out like Baba Yaga because it's no. She would be I would think she's either She would definitely not be lawful evil. She would be either neutral or chaotic. I would need to think about that a little bit because it's kind of she's I could see either way just off the top of my head. But she wouldn't be lawful evil.
No, okay.
Lawful evil might be somebody more like Kaveen from Quest for Glory 2.
Okay. Yes. That's, yeah, for some reason I was almost determined to find a Quest for Glory character for this one. Yeah, that one will definitely fit a lot better. Yeah, lawful evil is tough because, I think that one of the easier options to go with would be, maybe like a politician or someone, something in that realm, attorney, politician, whatever, a state official, let's say. But unfortunately, I can't really think of any.
Yeah. Or we're not going to talk about politics, but like, Darth Vader, lawful evil.
Right, exactly.
King Joffrey, lawful evil. Game of Thrones, Game of Thrones?
The references.
Okay.
Yeah.
King Joffrey is also a little bit of a weird one because I think he is ultimately, his spirit is probably chaotic evil, but he just takes advantage of his lawful position.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. So basically, it's taking anyone that's neutral or chaotic evil and putting them in a position of power. That's about it. If they happen to find themselves in power, then they're likely to be lawful evil.
But then there's also the question, like, does that necessarily make them lawful evil? Or this is why the alignment chart is so fascinating to think about, because there is a lot of nuance out of just such a deceptively simple concept.
Again, these middle slots, these neutral slots, are perhaps the hardest, because it's seeming as we're going through this list that a lot of the people on the lawful or chaotic side could very easily be vice versa, depending on perception or argument. Whereas finding the true neutrals of the three genres is a bit difficult. Neutral evil, for example, can read as it reads to me as sort of just pure evil. And what's to say that pure evil isn't extremely chaotic? It
isn't necessarily pure evil, but it is probably the most self-interested. Like who would be a good neutral evil in the Sierra-verse, for example? I think that's probably where. Oh god damn.
Would it be like Jesse Baines? Let me put it this way. I was going between two just then. I was thinking Jesse Baines or Vohal, where Jesse Baines is more just, he's evil in his own little world. He doesn't have this grandiose, domination, plan, whereas Vohal kind of does. So does, what I mean? Is Vohal considered chaotic evil because his plan is grandiose?
No, that has nothing to do with it.
Okay. Okay. So
I would probably say Vohal is neutral evil. Bane's probably chaotic evil because he has disdain for the law. Like, he is entirely just like that is actually a really good question. Maybe I've ventured into this being far less prepared than I thought I would be. I never claimed to be an authority on this. I was just trying to catch you up to speed on the general principles.
You're just being a mate and trying to help me understand more memes is really all.
And now all you've done is made me more confused and made me self-doubt my own understanding of this topic. So, to all of you at home, the lesson of this episode is that we should not ever be listened to as an authority for anything.
Yeah, exactly. Well, because it's not like we're on this pedestal with like conviction putting people in these slots. We're just trying our hardest. I mean, we'll hear your arguments.
We're trying to inspire conversation about this topic.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And if you feel like we've picked all wrong things, maybe that was bloody on purpose, because everyone reacts better to being pissed off than being pleased.
All I'm saying is I never claimed to be an expert. I really just wanted to talk about the use of alignment charts, and now you're like grilling me on what's right and wrong.
Gonna need you to get all the way off my back on this thing.
Yeah, actually, here's another thing, because like I said, I wanted to talk about alignment chart in terms of like its usefulness in character design and writing and creation. And one of the topics I really wanted to bring up was a really cool way to sort of think about the alignment chart is what a character is in terms of different perspectives. So somebody might see themselves as good, whereas the perspective of the story puts them as an antagonist and possibly evil, or they could even actually be evil, but they just themselves don't realize it, right? So a lot of perspectives can be played with in this way. So someone like Thanos does truly believe in his eyes and his mind that he is a true neutral, like he is a force of neutrality and balance in the universe. Right. That's literally his goal, is to be the agent of neutrality. As far as the MCU, I'm not going to talk about the comics. I don't know anything about him in the comics. But as far as the MCU is concerned, he himself believes that he is the truest force of neutrality. Whereas we, through our view, are like, he's neutral evil, as if you ask us. So that's a good example of a neutral evil, because he's not, he doesn't make any judgment in terms of law or order. He seeks his goals through just killing off half the universe, which we interpret as an evil act.
Right. Well, that's a perfect segue into the candidate I had in mind, which would be Dr. Fred from Maniac Mansion. Specifically singling it out from Day of the Tentacle, because he's a bit of a softie in that one. But in Maniac Mansion, Dr. Fred, to us, I think you could say is a bit of a neutral evil. Or
I would believe that, yeah.
Okay. I thought you were going the other way. I'm relieved. It took a lot of brain cells to make that thought, so I'm glad it's not in vain. So yeah, I would say neutral evil, but again, as with Thanos, I don't think Dr. Fred's perception of what he was doing would have been that it was evil. That right there is a great conversation piece, because it's, does their intentions have anything to do with our overall perception in labeling them?
Mm-hmm. Well, again, it's so subjective. It is entirely from point of perspective, right?
Yeah,
and that's why it sparks so much debate, because there's so much to interpret off of people's actions versus intent versus a lot of other factors.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. It's funny. The more I think about Dr. Fred, he's actually in Day of the Tentacle. He's actually kind of the victim. So for the sake of what we're discussing now, is just a Maniac Mansion. I'm going to say neutral evil, because he does kind of own and embody the evil scientist role. He doesn't seem like he's not trying to be labeled as such. He seems to own his 80s movie trope. Again, not the deepest of character as you struggle to find in any mid 80s game. Yeah, I'll go with Dr. Fred if you're in agreement.
Sure.
All right. Well,
so last one.
Yeah,
we're done.
Last one, chaotic evil.
Chaotic evil.
There's a lot of bloody candidates for this one.
Let's hear them.
The obscure one I'll go with is Donald Gordon from Phantasmagoria.
Moving on.
The next one I'll go with is yeah, sorry, I set that up like I had a bunch on hand, and I actually don't.
So have you thought of the obvious chaotic evil character in an adventure game?
No, because I was trying to
really?
I was trying to Google the name, but I got this old IBM clicky keyboard, and it's way too loud for me to get away with Googling real quick.
Okay. Well, let me see exactly how long it takes for you to figure this one out. See, there's a character in Loom whose name is Chaos.
I thought it just seemed too easy. I thought it was a bloody trap. How was what I thought the hardest one turn out to be the most served on a silver platter? Damn it. I can't even say, I've been thinking about Loom, because we bloody brought him up a few moments ago. Shite. Yeah, I can't counter that. I can't top it. The name is Chaos.
Yeah, ultimately what I want to convey throughout this episode was to talk about the usefulness of the tool in dissecting a lot of characters and or even planning characters for writing. Again, a lot of the creators might not have been at all thinking about the alignment charts when they're designing these characters. So we're not in any way saying that this is the rules. We're not saying that this is the definitive way to design a character. Obviously not. All these some characters which we've referenced were created well before the alignment chart existed. But I just think it's a really interesting way to sort of it's an interesting view in which to try to understand characters, their arcs, their motivations, and who they are. And it could be, and just because it seems like this flat grid, it does not mean that it can't either produce or explain very rounded characters.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Honestly, I think the more a character can fluctuate throughout this chart as a whole is probably the most complex characters, or the more complex their story arc was if you find them in different places at different times.
So let us know what you think about anything that we just said.
Maybe.
You can find us on Facebook. We have a page in a group. We're on Twitter at the CG Guild. We're on Instagram at CGG Podcast. We have an email address, mail@classicgamersguild.com. And we are on Patreon. Search for us there. And until next time.
Yeah, don't do a murder. Duty.